Welcome to Real Talk TV. My name is Darryl Buchannan. I'm your host. Today we'll be talking about the criminal justice system. It's an issue that I'm very passionate about. I just feel that there's a lot of misinformation, a lot of watered down information that gets passed on to the public. And I just want to bring up some issues and bring another side and hopefully give you guys a more clear perspective of what this system really entails. Today I have a very special guest. Her name's Lynn Currier. She's the director of Skweda Solutions. And I'm just happy to have you here. Can you introduce yourself to my guest, please?
Sure. Skweda Solutions is a consulting company that I started out of 14 years of helping people that are incarcerated. It's mostly men. I just happened to be pulled into events in the men's prison, so I continued working with them and ultimately for them to protect them from things that were going on that were not ethical and sometimes very cruel, because they were leaders within the prisons trying to really do good things. That has kind of grown from working with people behind the wall to trying to help them get out on parole or flip their case or get the correct sentence. A lot of people, as you well know, have been falsely convicted of crimes, especially murder, violent crimes. And they either, need to be exonerated, or they did something in self-defense or whatever, and they were overly sentenced. So it started with my youth work, then coming into prison, and then wanting to protect the men that were trying to help us stop violence and do good work behind the wall with the young people, to all the way to today, where I have this consulting company and I help people in all those areas. I have about 8 clients right now around the country, actually, in Florida and also Ohio. It's getting kind of, I'm spreading out.
Yeah.
I'm spreading out.
All right, good. I read somewhere that there's 23,000 years lost by prisoners who serve time for crimes that they haven't, that they didn't do. Mm-hmm. Can you talk a little bit about the exonerations and how does that happen? How do you go about getting someone exonerated? What is the process?
Well, what I could do is explain what I just did last year. I basically orchestrated someone coming home after 33 years. He was 18 in a self-defense situation, and what happened was, with his urging as well, I actually went back and found the jurors, which anybody can do that. Lawyers aren't allowed to do that. They have to get permission from a judge, which I don't personally think they should have to, but that's sort of a gatekeeper thing. But anybody can try to connect with jurors and ask them what their experience was like. This man, Corey Glover, who a lot of people know about, he knew there was racism in his trial, and then it took me 4 minutes of reading his transcripts to see that this judge was a racist. I mean, the way he talked to him was right out of Django. He threatened to tie him to the rail over there if he complained about having an all-white jury, which is really not legal, certainly not ethical. It's against the Constitution. So, of a jury of your peers. Yeah. But anyway, long story short, I bonded with this juror, and she came forward and she said it's been haunting her for 30 years. That this kid ended up, going away for first degree murder when it was really self-defense. She never felt good about it, so she ended up signing an affidavit stating that she never should have been set, which she shouldn't have. I look at what the judges do for misconduct or prejudice, prosecutors, whatever, and she basically said that I said I was racist. I not only said it, I described an example of when I called the police on 2 black men that did nothing wrong in my store. They were just browsing. So she's like, I know I shouldn't have been set. I had issues. I grew up in an all-white town, all that programming of a lot of white folks, and she wanted to help it. She actually would ask me, how is Corey? Tell him I said hi. Wow. Eventually, because it was a beautiful thing. That's all I can say, to have her come forward. And I personally think that, when the system is rigged against you because of your ethnicity or that you're poor, white, whatever, the system's not going to give up your freedom easily. They don't want to admit that they made a mistake or that they did something unethical or illegal. So you have to go routes like that to break open the truth, to expose it, so that the DA in that county, Essex County, for example, in our situation, couldn't say no. If anything, they wanted this man out fast. They gave him a plea bargain because they didn't want this blown up in the press. Essex County has a history of egregious racism up to today. And that's another whole thing that's growing out of this the situation with Corey Glover. We're now trying to get another man out. He was tried a month later. They were friends, waiting for trial, and he got railroaded too. He's innocent too. So I'm working on that case. So you have to look over the case. You have to look over the trial, and there are really good lawyers, and there are lawyers that, you know, they get their paycheck like any other job, unfortunately. But I find stuff that the lawyers don't see because I'm really motivated to get them home, like more so. Yeah. You know, for me, it's more about what's right, and it's about love. It's about, you know, I keep thinking of that young black or brown boy, you know, that didn't get a chance. Corey never should have been in prison. 32 years, he just came home. He never should have been in prison. So that to me is just morally wrong.
Yeah, it is. There is you know, I feel the same way. I mean, when I was locked up, I remember sitting across a guy, and because I said before, I never really thought that a person could really do a life sentence. I mean, to me, when, you know, coming up, I just couldn't see no one staying in. And I remember sitting next to a guy, and had been in prison for like 30, 40 years, and seeing seeing as through the years, seeing people age out and actually people die. I remember when I got out of Norfolk, I had went to visit the grave sites, you know, where the back the DOC's property.
Wow.
And I remember when I first went into prison, there was a guy, Richard Baptiste. He was like the governor. This was like 1979 when I was up there. And so one day I went to that cemetery, and I didn't know Richard. He was a good guy. He was a very powerful guy in the prison system. And I remember going over there, and I seen that little lot. They have these little marked graves with numbers on them. And I remember a friend of mine saying that was Richard's grave, you know.
With numbers on them?
They had numbers.
They bury them with numbers?
They actually had numbers on them.
Wow, talk about Nazi Germany. Sorry.
Yeah, you know, so I'm saying that to say that that's when I knew, you know, like this is real. There's people that are in prison now, been in there 30, 40 years. And I know, like, the public, society, they, you know, probably think people deserve that. And I was talking about Massachusetts says that we don't have the death penalty. And to me, we do. To me, a natural life sentence is just a slow death penalty. Can you talk about any situations where you've dealt with people that have been in, like, segregation for years, long-term isolations, and maybe some of its effects?
The man, Tony Gaskins, that I'm helping now, he told me one day, we're good friends, and he told me that he's been in DDU, which is the most heinous place where you get no rights and you get verbally and emotionally and physically abused all the time. He was there he's been in and out of there for 10 years. Imagine what that does to a person. You know, it's amazing to me that Tony and these other men that I've gotten to know and care about are saying it all. You know, it's truly, it shows you the human spirit, the strength of the human spirit. I mean, this man is a self-taught lawyer. The DOC doesn't like him because he takes them to court and wins all the time for their abuses, you know, especially like asbestos abuse in facilities like Concord and different things. But yeah.
So yeah, Tony's been there for a long time. The DDU, I don't know if it's that, for those that don't know, DDU is a prison inside of a prison, and they put people there that, you know, they don't want to deal with, people that, you know, rightly have violated some of the institutional rules. But that place, man, I remember being there when they were building that in Walpole, and I just couldn't believe it that they were building another. You know, we have 10 Block, we have RB, we have all these other places. Why are you building this place, man? And people go in there, and I heard a lot of people was talking about it literally drives you insane.
Oh, it's the cruelest thing. I mean, I know of someone that has been there for 9 years straight. With Tony, it was in and out, because he was an activist. But, I mean, Corey was there. I mean, especially the young guys, it seems like the young guys end up there because they're, a lot of them don't calm down, so to speak. They're still, don't like authority a lot, so they resent the young ones. But it's not just the young ones, it's the activists. It's just to be cruel. I say this to everybody, there's some good, decent people that work for the DOC, but there's a very, very, very high percentage that are not great people, and some are, I think, mentally off, really cruel, sadistic. They enjoy having people that they can control and degrade. I mean, I'm sure you saw it, calling guys the N-word, calling them dogs, calling them monkeys. I mean, it's horrific, the stuff that I've gathered over the years. I mean, I have a tremendous amount of evidence of the abject racism, the brutality, people trying to set people up, people putting COs putting vulnerable people in segregation if they won't set somebody up by putting drugs in their cell. I mean, you name it. It's ugly as it can get, and the public needs to know about it.
Yeah, that's my whole point. Like when doing the shows, getting the right information. The public, they think they're safe. For instance, I was thinking about when I really started thinking about these guys getting exonerated, doing 40 years, 30 years, 42 years. And the public, kind of felt they were safe, when the reality is, when the media talks about these exonerations, they don't talk about the fact that this guy did 42 years and they let him out, but they don't bring the part up that for 42 years, the real killer, the real rapist has been among the public, inside the public, in the fabric of our communities.
Yeah.
Yeah. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a great point, is that if you really care about public safety, why are you going to sweep some 19, 20-year-old, 17, 15-year-old off the street before you really have a case against them? When I mean, I know of a case right now, it's another person I'm advocating for in Essex County, who he had nothing to do, we didn't even know the victim, nothing to do with him. He was a college kid, with a nice future, whatever. And the police actually got a call from someone, anonymous call, saying exactly who did it. And they ignored it, didn't tell the family there was another suspect. And that guy's running free. The BU Law School actually found him because he got into trouble in Maryland. And they laid it all out. His lawyer laid it all out for the DA's office, and they wouldn't look at it. DA Blodgett said, this is, So that's what we're dealing with.
And that's pervasive, and that's been a long term. I mean, that's been throughout the years. I mean, this stuff that we're talking about, it just didn't happen. This is systemic processing, whether it's systemic racism or this rush to judgment. The public's outcry to close cases. You think does that push these officers or push these district attorneys to rush to convict people, and especially more poor people and people
who can't get a good lawyer.
They
know that.
Exactly.
They know that.
Yeah. What we call them public pretenders.
Yeah.
So what do you think about that?
Yeah. Well, I think that some of it is public pressure, but I think a lot of it that I've seen, because of the way they protect each other, is that they're getting notches on their belt. They're getting promotions. The more bodies that they get behind the wall, especially the prosecutors, they often want to become judges, and I've seen it with Tony Gaskin's case. The prosecutor that did some things that I consider quite unethical, he's now an illustrious judge in the state of Massachusetts. So, it's not just a public outcry. I mean, we all want someone who's murdered someone to be, accountable for what they did. And I want to be clear about myself, because I never want to be misunderstood. I'm not someone who just runs around and tries to get guys in prison home if they killed somebody, people that have murdered people's kids home. That's not where I'm at all. Yeah. If I believe with all the evidence I've seen and recommendations from people that I know and trust that this person, we all believe is innocent, then I'll go to bat for that person. But I don't just randomly, someone's a serial killer, someone, you know what I mean?
Yeah, no.
Someone's really demented, so to speak. I don't try to help them get out. I stay away from all of that.
Okay.
And if someone took my son's life, I'm not going to sit here and say I would do this work. I probably wouldn't. So I don't know how I would be, but I know too many men that have changed their lifestyle, as you know well.
Yeah.
They are different people. They might have been, not living the right way, but they were innocent, or they weren't living the right way, and they got into a situation and they were guilty. But now, 20 years later, they're some of the most honorable men I've ever met,
Yeah.
inside, outside, wherever, because they've sought redemption, and they've really, really focused on their own growth and understanding what made them do that as a kid.
Yeah.
Kids aren't born to be violent like this. What happened to them along the way before this even went down?
Yeah. What do you think about the public perceptions of prisoners? I'm sure you dealt with a lot of people in the public. What do you think their perception is, and how do we go about perhaps changing some of these perceptions, getting them to really care about what goes on behind those walls? Because if they don't, like most of the guys behind the wall are coming home.
Right.
They're coming back into the community. So how do you get the public to care more? So they can be more receptive when he's receiving these guys, instead of the biases or having the fears.
There are three very concrete ways. One, to get the most conservative people that don't really care that much about people that are in prison monetarily. It's costing the state, I think it's 50-something, 60 grand a year. More than going to most colleges to have somebody behind the wall. So the state's losing and wasting a tremendous amount of our tax dollars. Another way is for them to realize, for the average person to realize that if you want public safety, you need to do what you're supposed to do when people are in prison so that they come home not less whole, but more whole. And as you know, the level of brutalization and abuse and torture that goes on, and the lack of programming, the budget is enormous. I think it's the third largest budget for staff salaries in the country. Wow. But the programming is minimal. So, if you want people to come back healthy, then you all need to pay attention to what's going on, because you're not going to be happy when you see where your tax dollars are going. Yeah. And then the third thing is, and this is what I've tried to do, and this is how I've actually met some men, is I think their voices, the men and women's voices, need to be heard on the outside. We need to bring them into the community. And I actually have been doing that, and others have too, where we have a rally, someone's on the phone and they speak to the crowd. But also I started with Mac Hudson, I started a Facebook page called From Cell Block to City Block, which Mel King gave us the title. Basically, people behind the wall write letters to the youth directly to them. Sometimes it's poetry, spoken word, or story, anything they want to do. And we put it out on Facebook for the youth, and we send them to youth organizations. And the youth are incredibly impacted. It's powerful for them, because they know these people have serious credibility. It's no joke.
No.
I can say it to them, but do you think they're going to listen to me, or are they going to listen to these guys?
Yeah.
So, but the general public needs to hear their words too, and to see, wow, these are good people. These are people that actually care. They're not just doing this to impress us and have us help them come home. They really are doing it behind the wall, and they want to share it with the youth that have not gotten in trouble yet, that have not gone the wrong way, or they're in the mix and they need to step out and think twice. So I think those three things are imperative.
Good. I remember as being a kid, yes, going to prison, I said it before in the last show, that it became more like a rite of passage for me. Going to prison for me was not abnormal. It's more like normal. It wasn't really a big thing when I went in prison. I mean, going in and finding, all the stuff that was happening there, but just to go in there. So I know where the youth, where their heads are. And I always say a thing where, the men in prison are the solution. They are the medication for the kids, and they keep why, if a person's dying and you have the medication, why would you keep it locked up, right? Another thing that I was concerned about was the costly, the way they extract money, the way the prison system basically has you, pushing up on your family for commissary, for overpriced commissary, overpriced phones. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, the thing that I actually just learned this piece, it's not just that these companies are, making money off from the backs of people. The DOC gets a percentage of whatever they make. So the state is making money off the backs of these men and women, as well as these private companies. Why is it free for me to use Gmail, but these men and women behind the wall have to pay for it? Please tell me how that works, So it's all the capitalist system, the industrial complex, it's all the money-making thing. And when people say it's modern-day slavery, sorry, it is modern-day slavery. I was, as I mentioned before, when we've just spoken in general, I was at the forefront of trying to get people decarcerated when COVID hit, because I knew they weren't going to get the proper care and whatever. And I also knew, and I saw very, very clearly and painfully, that they hold on to those men and women with a death grip. They do not want them going home. I had this one young guy, Stephen, that I worked with for years. I had to literally keep him alive because he was being so brutalized. And an older white man told him, as a young black man finally going home after all this incredible brutalization this guy sustained, he actually had the audacity to look at him and say, "Wow, I don't want to lose, I don't want to lose overtime. I don't want to lose my job." Like, how do you look at a young black boy as a privileged white man and say that? What kind of mentality would feel so superior that they would say that to somebody's child? That just sums it up.
Yeah, it does.
Because again, there's a lot of racism behind the wall. There's a lot of racism behind the wall.
Do you think it's systemic? I mean,
yes.
What I mean was
comes from the top.
Yeah, you're right, because there's a lot of guys, like we say, there's bad in everything. We already know that, and there's also some good. But I think with the DOC, from my point, it's systemic. Meaning, like, even if a guy, there's a kid comes in and he's, even if he comes from a diverse community, he goes into that system, works for that system. Eventually, he'll start taking on the form, the perceptions and the attitudes and the biases of that system, because that system is,
Right.
people don't go. That's why it's people like me and you that have to speak about this, because that system doesn't allow another officer to say anything bad about another officer, even when he knows this officer was
Right.
wrong. He just beat this guy
Right.
up, or he just, whatever he did, another officer won't speak on it because of this system, this code of silence. And I think that's what keeps, because the public will hear. I think if the officers came out and told the truth, which is, I don't think that's going to happen. But if they did, maybe the public would be, or will believe what we're talking about more.
Yes. And it's bugging me because I'm blanking on her name, but there was an interim DOC commissioner, a woman. I don't know if you remember her. Anyway, she was in office for a few years. And what these COs did to her, they slashed her tires. They did all kinds of things to intimidate her because she actually wanted to make, improvements and make it more humane and more therapeutic. And they resented that because there's a certain mentality with, I'm sorry, but a majority of the COs and the administration where they do not want these men and women feeling good about themselves. They want to demasculate the men, defeminize the women, and keep them under their thumb. And I mean, there was a form that they took down from Concord, and it was online. And you should see, I've got them. You should see the comments. And I want to say Dennehy. I think it was Dennehy.
That sounds familiar too.
She's a great person. I've seen her speak. She's a really good human being. But there were comments about her. There were other racist comments, misogynist comments about women. I mean, some of these people are just miserable. Yeah. Now, again, some are not. Some are actually good people that I have talked to recently that I have a lot of respect for. Yeah. But unfortunately, it's probably, I've been told by some people, probably about 80% are the ones that are not great people.
Yeah, it's very prevalent. On an easier note,
Oh, is there an easy part to this?
No, easy. No, let's see what easy. No. The Celtics. They wanted to come in. I remember in the '80s, just a lot of a couple of Celtics players used to come in, and in the '80s we had a great team. I mean, there was some pro behind the wall. There was some guys there that were like really good basketball players. So they used to have these professional players go in and play them. I just heard something about the Celtics were supposed to go into the MCI Norfolk and and play a basketball game against the prisoners. Do you know anything about that?
I heard about it just online, and I was very, very, very unhappy to find out that the DOC is saying that there was public outrage and that stopped them now from doing it.
So it's canceled.
Yeah, but I just want to say quickly, within the same few days, there was an incident in Shirley Medium, which was very sad and unfortunate, where one of the guys who didn't have it together hit a CO with a pipe.
Yeah.
So obviously that's horrific, and my heart goes out to him and his family. I mean, how could it not? But that is not a reason, but I believe it's why they canceled it. I don't think it's about public outcry, because the public doesn't pay that much attention, first of all.
No, they don't.
Yeah, I mean, please, if they paid attention, this would be a whole nother conversation.
Yes, yeah.
But I think it's part of that. It's a punitive thing of like, okay, you're gonna hurt one of our dudes or one of our guys. We're gonna, because they're taking the weights away from people in the weight rooms. They're doing everything to just push them all down. Yeah. To teach them a lesson. It's like men in that facility didn't have anything to do with what one individual did. And I'm sorry, but especially in Sousa, people get beaten all the time by guards, and we don't hear about that. Yeah. As soon as something like this happens, which we should know about it, we hear it in the press within hours. As soon as someone's beaten, they start covering it up, and we're lucky if we hear about it.
Yeah. The deal is that system, this system is it's a really bad, dangerous system. I mean, for me, it was more of it was I didn't get too much physical, but it was more mental and psychological.
Cruelty.
It was really like really psychological for me. I remember being in DSU in Norfolk. I was in the DSU. I came from Walpole, 6 months there. I had to do that, 10 blocks, and I phased out. I was in the phase program. Then I went to Norfolk, and I remember being there, and I had one person that was communicating with me. And so I'm in the hole for 23 hours a day. It's, anybody that knows Norfolk, the heat's on 24 hours a day.
Yeah,
You know what I mean?
I know that
You're
one.
sweat. You're just sweating, even in the winter. And then I remember they let me out in the winter. They let me out for recreation, my 1 hour, and I had to go to a roof, right? And I'm making so much snow, and I'm walking through the snow just because I needed to get my hour out. But I say that to say, I remember this one guy that had got an argument with this one guy because he was instigating another inmate and riling him up. And I just put my 2 cents in, and I remember being there, and for weeks I didn't get mail. I used to get mail all the time.
Oh, yeah.
And I didn't get mail, so I thought this female was done with me, right? I'd go on the phone to make a phone call. You only get one chance to make a phone call.
Yeah.
And it'd be a busy dial. I'm like, man, why is this girl not? And come to find out it had nothing to do with her. They had stopped my mail, and anytime they had control of the phone, so anytime I pick up the phone, they'll just do that, and then that's, you know what I mean? So it was a lot of psychological warfare for me going through that.
It still goes on. I mean, I've had this one particular person, they would disappear his legal mail, and I had to call about it, and I said, this is a felony, hint, hint, and within hours, the next afternoon, they raided his cell to try to find something that they could lug him, they say, put him in segregation for, when they're the ones doing the middle school bully stuff. But these are felonies. What are happening with legal mail and whatnot? What they did with you happens all the time, as you know, and that's just plain cruelty, and it's against their own policies. So, all these things have been brought to the DOC's attention, but they still let it happen because they're all buddies. They're family members. They have generationally, a lot of them have grown up working in the DOC, so they're tight as anything, and it's really hard to break that wall with them.
It really is, especially with the public. Do you have any closing statements or remarks that you say what you want to say?
Just I guess to say that that, you know, they say a society is judged by how many people they incarcerate. And what is it, 25% of the world's prisoners are in this country. So that tells you a lot about what this country is truly about. It's a capitalist country where, again, bodies are money behind the wall. And it's cruel. I'm deeply, deeply ashamed and outraged that I live in a country that does not represent me, in a state that does not represent me and my values and the values of average, decent people. And that we need to take a serious look at how people are incarcerated, how many, why, how long, how they're treated. Unless someone is like insanely violent, you know what I mean, or a pedophile, someone that really needs to be separated. The vast majority of people in prison should be in community programs, or they should be in halfway houses, or, you know, they need help with drug addiction, or they need help with whatever, you know, their own PTSD from growing up in a really rough neighborhood, or being abused at home, or whatever the situation. So this whole thing is backwards, and it's brutal, and it just digs a deeper and deeper hole into our society, and we need to expose it, and we need to also give alternatives to these types of prisons.
Thank you. Really, I really appreciate you coming.
Thank
I
you.
really appreciate hearing you talk. And I'm hoping that something does come from this. You know what I mean? Some way that someone hears it and starts taking a really interest behind, you know, about what's going on behind the wall, because it is crazy behind there, and it's probably more crazy if we could express it in different language. It probably we could express it a little bit better. But just thank you for coming.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
And thank you guys for coming too. Again, my name is Darryl Buchannan, and this is Real Talk TV, and I want to say to Taisha, Darryl, and Zayla, I love you.